The rain hammered against the tall windows of the Cascade Hotel as Natalie Harper dragged her suitcase through the polished lobby. Everything gleamed, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and the scent of fresh lilies floating through the air. She had never stayed anywhere this fancy before. Her firm, Sterling Design Group had sent her to Seattle for a 3-day architecture and design conference. She was determined to make the most of it. Natalie checked her phone for the 5th time. Room 2104. She repeated it like a mantra. As the elevator climbed to the 21st floor, the hallway stretched before her, soft carpet absorbing the sound of her footsteps. Ahead, one door stood slightly open, the number glowing in brass, 2104. Housekeeping must have left it open, she muttered, knocking twice. Silence. The air conditioning sent a gentle draft, nudging the door wider. "Hello?" she called softly. Stepping just inside the threshold, that's when he appeared. A man emerged from the bathroom, steam billowing around him like morning fog. Tall, with dark hair still wet and dripping, his skin flushed from the heat. He wore only a towel around his waist, and for a moment, neither of them moved. His eyes, deep gray, almost silver, met hers with a mixture of surprise and something else she couldn't name. "The escape? Oh, no," Natalie gasped, stumbling backward. Her suitcase caught on the carpet edge, nearly sending her sprawling. "I'm so sorry." The man grabbed the edge of his towel instinctively, one eyebrow lifting slightly. He might have been about to say something, but Natalie had already bolted. She rushed across the hall to the door directly opposite, also marked 2104. Her real room. Her hand shook as she fumbled with the key card inside. She slammed the door and leaned against it, heart racing like she'd run a marathon. The image of wet shoulders, gray eyes, and white towel replayed in her mind with embarrassing clarity. "Perfect, Natalie. Day 1, and you're already a disaster," she whispered. Covering her face with her hands, she made a plan right then. Avoid leaving the room unless absolutely necessary. If she had to go out, use the service elevator. Never, ever knock on another door without being absolutely certain. The new beginning Monday morning arrived too quickly. The conference had ended without further incident, and Natalie had successfully avoided any additional encounters with the mystery man from room 108. Now, the company car delivered her team straight to Sterling Design Group's headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Seattle. Natalie adjusted her bag, strapped, and walked through the revolving doors. The atrium soared above her, led screens displaying award-winning architectural projects. The building itself was a testament to modern design, all clean lines and natural light. At 9 o'clock sharp, an internal message appeared on her phone. "All architecture staff to Aurora conference room. CEO joining for quarterly review." Natalie's stomach fluttered with first-day nerves. She'd heard the CEO was brilliant but demanding, someone who had built Westbrook Enterprises from nothing into one of the most successful development companies. On the West Coast, she'd never seen his photo. The man was notoriously private. The revelation, the Aurora conference room, buzzed with quiet conversation as staff members filed in. Natalie chose a seat in the back row, opened her notebook, and focused on the agenda. The department head gave a brief introduction, reminding everyone that the CEO would be present to review the quarterly architectural proposals. Then the door opened. The room straightened, collectively, and Natalie lifted her head with polite attention. Her heart stopped. The man who entered, flanked by 2 assistants, was him. No steam, no towel, no wet hair. Just a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and those unmistakable gray eyes. The department head's introduction echoed in Natalie's ears. Julian Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Enterprises. Natalie's pen slipped from her fingers, clattering onto her notebook. She quickly retrieved it, bending low, praying to become invisible. This couldn't be happening. The CEO, the man from the hotel, the same person. Julian took his seat at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping the room with practiced precision. When his eyes reached the back row where Natalie sat frozen, they paused, just for a heartbeat, then moved on as if nothing had happened. Natalie pressed her pen so hard against the paper that the ink bled through. "Breathe," Act normal. Take notes. The bold proposal. The meeting progressed through various presentations. Julian rarely interrupted, but when he did, his questions were sharp and precise. Why this material? Where's the sustainability data? What's the backup plan? Each inquiry left presenters scrambling through their slides when the topic shifted to the new waterfront development project. The senior architect proposed a conventional approach. Traditional glass curtain walls, standard LEED certification, predictable commercial residential mix. Natalie listened, scribbling notes. The word safe appeared 3 times in her margin. Notes, then predictable, finally forgettable. Any additional thoughts? The department head asked, more out of courtesy than expectation. Natalie's hand rose before her brain could stop it. Heads turned. She stood, forcing her voice steady despite her trembling knees. I'd like to propose an adaptive facade system, she began. Instead of static glass walls, we could integrate photovoltaic panels that adjust to sunlight angles. The building wouldn't just exist in the environment, it would respond to it. Paired with a rainwater harvesting system integrated into the architecture itself, we could reduce energy consumption by 40% while creating a visual landmark that changes throughout the day. Murmurs rippled through the room. The senior architect frowned. The engineering challenges alone would push us over budget and behind schedule. Another voice added, Harper's only been here a week. Has she even reviewed our structural limitations? Natalie gripped her pen tighter. I have. I've also contacted 2 engineering firms that specialize in adaptive systems. One can provide preliminary models within a week. The initial investment is higher, but the long-term savings and environmental impact would set a new standard. If our goal is to lead rather than follow, this is how we do it. Silence fell across the room. At the head of the table, Julian leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, his gray eyes fixed directly on Natalie, unreadable and intense. The moment stretched like pulled glass. Budget concerns, the CFO reminded. Technical risks, the project manager added. Timeline pressure, another architect chimed in. 3 objections, each one a stone thrown at her proposal. Natalie inhaled. Slowly, I recognize all 3 risks. But if we want to distinguish ourselves in a saturated market, we need to take calculated risks. I believe this is one worth taking. The decision. Julian's pen made a quiet click. He made a single notation in his leather portfolio, then spoke in a low, measured voice. Proceed with the proposal. The room went still. Engineering team to collaborate with architecture, Julian continued, his tone brooking no argument. I want a detailed feasibility study and preliminary models within 7 days. Harper leads the adaptive design. Everyone else supports. Budget approved from the Innovation Fund. The department head's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Some people began typing furiously. Others exchanged glances of surprise. Natalie stood motionless, her heart doing something between a leap and a somersault. Fear and exhilaration mixed in equal measure. Understood, she managed to say, her voice somehow remaining professional. Julian had already moved to the next agenda item, his expression neutral. But as he summarized the meeting objectives, his eyes flickered to the back row for half a second. Just long enough for Natalie to catch the briefest warmth at the corner of his mouth, the hallway.
Auments.
The meeting dispersed gradually. Natalie waited until most people had left before gathering her materials. She stepped into the hallway, her mind already racing through vendor contacts and preliminary calculations. Harper, the voice came from behind her deep, clear, unmistakable. She turned. Julian stood a few paces away, one hand in his pocket, his posture relaxed, yet commanding. Up close, she caught a faint scent of cedar wood and something crisp, like winter air. Your proposal, he said evenly. Don't let the objections dilute it. If you need internal approvals expedited, send the requests directly to me. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. His presence filled the space, like architecture itself. Yes, Natalie replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. I'll send updates as we progress. He gave a slight nod. Good. Then he walked away, his footsteps measured and confident. Natalie stepped into the elevator, catching her reflection in the polished steel doors. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes unusually bright. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Everything had returned to normal, she told herself. Just not the quiet, predictable normal she'd expected. This was a normal filled with challenge and possibility. In her mind, his words proceed with the proposal appeared in bold, like a headline on a blueprint. She pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message to the engineering team. Adaptive facade. Kickoff meeting. 2 p.m. Full feasibility assessment. Let's build something remarkable. Down another corridor. Julian passed the glass walls of the executive floor, his reflection stretching alongside him. He wasn't thinking about the hotel or the wrong door anymore. In his mind remained a single image, a young architect. Hand trembling slightly, but voice unwavering, laying a bold vision on the table against 3 major objections, then saying, with quiet conviction, I believe this is one worth taking. That precise combination of vulnerability and courage was what made him say, proceed. Monday morning closed with phone calls made, emails sent, and a new rhythm beginning in 2 hearts. Everything seemed to have returned to normal, except this normal had opened an unexpected door, not left ajar by accident but pushed wide open, by choice. Asterisk 7 days later, the adaptive facade proposal launched at Westbrook Enterprises' quarterly showcase. Natalie stood backstage, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drumbeat. On the massive screen, her 3D renderings rotated slowly, building that breathed with the environment, surface shifting like scales on a living creature responding to sunlight, rain, and wind. The presentation room filled with investors, architects, and journalists. When the lights dimmed and her voice came through the speakers explaining the concept, Natalie felt weightless. Every calculation, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led to this. The response was immediate. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed within an hour. Architecture blogs were calling it the future of sustainable design. Industry leaders tweeted photos. The hashtag adaptive architecture began trending. The senior architect who had doubted her approached with a handshake. Harper, I underestimated you. That was extraordinary. Natalie smiled, gracious but guarded. She knew how quickly praise could turn to resentment in competitive environments. The next morning, the review meeting crackled with energy. The department heads presented metrics with visible excitement. Media coverage exceeded projections by 300%. We've received 17 inquiries from potential clients. The board wants to fast-track development. As the reports concluded, all eyes shifted to Julian Westbrook. He sat at the head of the table, his expression characteristically unreadable, flipping through his notes. The silence stretched taut. Then he looked up, his gray eyes landing directly on Natalie. The proposal exceeded all expectations, he said, his voice low and clear. Harper, you demonstrated precisely what this company needs. Vision combined with execution. The room held its breath. Westbrook Enterprises was known for its CEO's sparing praise. His words carried more weight than any trophy. Natalie stood, her legs somehow steady despite her racing heart. Thank you. It's an honor to contribute to the company's vision. Julian gave a slight nod, then addressed the entire room. This should be our standard. Innovation requires courage. Harper showed us what happens when we commit to bold ideas rather than safe ones. I expect everyone here to bring that same spirit to your work. Applause broke out again, but Natalie barely heard it. Her ears burned, and she didn't dare look around. Inside, her chest bloomed a pride she could barely contain. The shadow sighed in. The following weeks, Natalie Harper's name echoed through every corridor. The adaptive facade architect, the CEO's discovery, Westbrook's rising star. With admiration came something darker. Some colleagues grew distant. Others whispered when she passed. In the break room, she overheard fragments of conversation that made her chest tighten. She's just the CEO's favorite. Right place, right time. Luck, not talent. Anyone could have proposed something flashy. Watch how fast she falls when the real challenges come. Natalie kept her head down and her work sharp. She knew every workplace operated this way. Cess attracted both admirers and enemies. The only response was to prove herself again and again. One evening, working late on preliminary engineering specs, she passed the executive floor. Most offices were dark, but light spilled from the corner suite. Through the glass wall, she saw Julian alone, his suit jacket draped over his chair, shirt sleeves rolled up. Eyes fixed on his laptop screen. The blue glow illuminated his face, serious, yet somehow softer than in the boardroom. Natalie froze, an unbidden memory flashing. The hotel room, steam billowing, the man in the towel. Between that image and this, one stretched a vast distance, yet they were the same person. Something stirred in her chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. She quickly turned away, refusing to linger on the feeling. He's the CEO, I'm an employee. Professional boundaries exist for a reason, but her heart didn't listen. It still beat faster whenever she remembered his words in the hallway. Don't let it. The objections dilute it. The return that Thursday, Natalie was reviewing structural calculations when the receptionist's voice drifted through the open office door. This way, please. Mr. Westbrook is expecting you. Natalie glanced up, curious. A woman walked past, tall, elegant, wearing a burgundy dress that seemed painted on. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and her smile radiated confidence. Something about her presence made the hallway seem brighter, as if she carried her own spotlight. Natalie didn't recognize her, but the whispers started immediately among nearby colleagues. Is that Victoria Ashford? His ex-fiancée? I thought she moved to New York. She did. What's she doing back? Natalie's fingers tightened around her pen. Victoria Ashford. The name she'd heard in breakroom gossip, the woman who had been engaged to Julian, who had broken his heart, who had left him for someone wealthier, someone with an older fortune. Through the glass walls of Julian's office, Natalie watched the scene unfold. Julian stood as Victoria entered, his posture rigid, his expression carved from stone. Victoria's smile trembled at the edges, her hands clasped together. Even from a distance, Natalie could see Victoria speaking, gesturing softly, her body language pleading. Julian remained motionless, his face revealing nothing. Then Victoria reached out and took his hand. Natalie's breath caught. The simple gesture looked intimate, familiar, like muscle memory. Julian didn't pull away immediately, stood there, Victoria's hand in his, and though his expression remained cold, the fact that he hadn't withdrawn felt like a dagger to Natalie's chest. She looked away, her heart clenching painfully. Quickly she gathered her papers and left the office. The folder she'd meant to have Julian sign still clutched uselessly in her hands. Asterisk the withdrawal in the days that followed. Natalie built walls. She timed her arrivals and departures to avoid crossing paths with Julian. In meetings, she kept her eyes firmly on her notes. When he spoke, she listened professionally, responded when necessary, then excused herself at the first opportunity. Her emails became shorter, stripped of any warmth. Attached are the revisions. Please advise. Meeting confirmed for Tuesday. At 10, budget approved. Proceeding with vendor selection. Julian noticed. How could he not? The architect who had once stayed late to discuss design philosophy now left promptly at 5. The woman who had debated material choices with passion now delivered reports with mechanical efficiency. In meetings where she'd once leaned forward with bright ideas, she now sat back, contributing only when directly asked. One afternoon, Julian saw her laughing with colleagues near the design studio, but the moment he appeared at the end of the hallway, her smile vanished. She murmured something about a deadline and disappeared into the stairwell. Julian's jaw tightened, frustration sparking beneath his carefully maintained composure. He wasn't accustomed to being avoided, especially not by someone whose presence had somehow become significant. That evening, he called the department head. Is there an issue with Harper's workload? Not that I'm aware of, came the confused reply. She's meeting all deadlines. Actually, she seems quieter lately, but her work is excellent. Julian ended the call and stood at his office window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights into watercolor smears. He remembered the rainy night that started everything, not the hotel encounter, but something else. A moment when Natalie had seemed less guarded, more real. Now she'd retreated behind professional walls so high he couldn't see over them. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built similar walls after Victoria. But seeing Natalie construct her own made something in his chest tighten uncomfortably. The rainy night Friday evening arrived with another downpour. Natalie had stayed late again, this time genuinely working rather than hiding. When she finally packed up and headed for the exit, rain assaulted the glass doors with relentless force. Opened her umbrella, but the wind immediately inverted it, snapping one of the metal ribs. "Perfect," she muttered, struggling against the storm. A sleek silver car pulled up to the curb. The window descended, revealing Julian behind the wheel. "Get in," he said, his voice cutting through the rain's roar. "You'll be drenched." "No, thank you." "I can manage," Natalie replied, holding up her broken umbrella as if it proved something. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "In what world does that thing qualify as managing?" "Get in, Harper." Another gust of wind drove rain into her face, and Natalie's resolve crumbled. She hurried to the passenger side and slipped into the car, immediately enveloped by the scent of leather and that subtle cedarwood cologne. The door closed, sealing them in quiet warmth while the storm raged outside. Natalie buckled her seatbelt, staring determinedly out the window. Julian drove calmly, his hands steady on the wheel. No music played, no calls interrupted. Just the rhythmic sweep of windshield wipers and the weight of unspoken words. Then his voice came, quiet but deliberate. "You've been avoiding me." Wasn't a question. Natalie's head turned sharply. In the dim light from the dashboard, his profile was sharp and serious, eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road. "I've been busy with the project," she said, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "That's not what I'm talking about, and you know it." He paused, then added, "Victoria came to see me." Natalie's hands clenched in her lap. "I know, I saw. What exactly did you see?" "Enough," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I saw her holding your hand. I saw you not pulling away." Julian's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "You saw a moment. You didn't see what came before or after." "It doesn't matter," Natalie said, forcing strength into her voice. "Your past is your business. I'm just an employee." The car slowed, pulling to the curb in front of her apartment building. Julian shifted in too. Park but didn't unlock the doors. Instead, he turned to face her fully. "Just an employee," he repeated, his gray eyes searching hers. "Is that really what you think you are?" Natalie's breath hitched. She couldn't meet his gaze. "What else would I be? Someone I notice?" Julian said, his voice low and intense. "Someone whose absence changes the temperature of every room. Someone I think about far more than is professionally appropriate." Her eyes widened, her heart hammering. Please don't say things like that if you're still holding on to the past." "I'm not holding on to anything," he said firmly. "Victoria came back looking for something that doesn't exist anymore. I told her that clearly. What you saw was her trying and me refusing. The only reason I didn't pull away immediately was shock, not invitation." Natalie bit her lip, tears threatening. "How am I supposed to know what's real? You're so controlled, so careful. Never know what you're thinking." Julian leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Then let me be clear. Since the morning you walked into that boardroom, I haven't stopped thinking about you. Not as an employee. Someone who makes me want to tear down every wall I've built." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and powerful. Natalie's defenses cracked. "I was afraid I was just a distraction. Someone convenient while you healed from someone else. You're not a distraction, Natalie." He spoke her first name for the first time, and it sounded different in his voice. Intimate, deliberate. "Oh. You're the first person in years who's made me want to feel something again." Rain drummed on the roof, creating a cocoon of sound around them. Natalie finally looked at him, really looked, and saw past the CEO, past the composed exterior, to the man beneath. Vulnerable, honest, waiting. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "Then don't be," Julian said softly. He reached out, his hand covering hers. "Whatever this is between us, let's find out together." No more hiding. No more assumptions. Natalie turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. The simple touch sent warmth flooding through her chest. Okay, she breathed. Together. Julian smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Together. They sat in the rain-wrapped car for another moment, hands joined, the distance between them finally closing. When Natalie eventually stepped out into the storm, she turned back to see Julian watching her through the window. His expression open in a way she'd never seen before. She ran into her building, soaked and shivering, but inside her chest burned. Something bright and undeniable. Hope. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a well-written book. Natalie and Julian fell into a rhythm that felt both thrilling and terrifying, stolen glances across conference rooms. Late-night work sessions that stretched into conversations about everything except architecture, his hand finding hers in empty elevators. But they kept it quiet. Professional boundaries still mattered. Neither wanted to fuel the gossip that already swirled around Natalie's rapid rise. One Thursday evening, Natalie sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen. The adaptive facade project had entered its critical phase, and pressure mounted from all sides. She needed to talk to someone who understood. Someone outside the situation? She opened her email and began typing to her best friend, Rachel, who lived across the country. I don't know what to do anymore. The project is consuming everything, but that's not even the biggest issue. I've fallen for him, Rachel. It's actually fallen. Julian isn't just my boss. He's become the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. But I'm terrified. What if I'm reading everything wrong? What if the walls he's lowered for me go back up? Everything I've worked for on something that might not be real. She reread the words, her finger hovering over the send button. Taking a deep breath, she clicked it. Send. Only then did her eyes focus on the recipient field. Her blood turned to ice. The email hadn't gone to Rachel at rachelmartinez@email.com. It had gone to Julian Westbrook at westbrookenterprises.com. She whispered, her hands shaking. No, no, no. She frantically checked her sent folder, hoping somehow she'd misread. But there it was, time-stamped 30 seconds ago. Her confession laid bare for the one person who should never have seen it. Natalie closed her laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. Her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. Everything she'd been so careful to protect, every boundary she'd maintained, shattered in a single misclick. The response across the city. Julian sat in his penthouse office, reviewing the day's reports. A notification appeared. New email from Natalie Harper. He opened it, expecting a project update or schedule clarification. Instead, he read words that made his heart stop, then race. I've fallen for him. Julian isn't just my boss. ... Terrified. What if I'm reading everything wrong? Julian read the email 3 times, each pass revealing new layers. This wasn't meant for him. The raw vulnerability, the honest fear, the confession that mirrored his own carefully guarded feelings. She'd never intended him to see any of it. Yet here it was, displayed on his screen like a gift he didn't deserve but desperately wanted. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile crossing his face, despite the gravity of the situation. All this time, Natalie had been as conflicted as he was, as afraid, as hopeful. The walls she'd rebuilt after. Victoria's appearance hadn't been indifference. They'd been protection against the same feelings that kept him awake at night. Julian stood, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. Some conversations couldn't happen over email or phone calls, while some truths required being in the same room, breathing the same air. The confrontation, Natalie paced her apartment, phone clutched in her hand, debating whether to send a follow-up email, explaining, apologizing, or just resigning immediately to avoid the inevitable awkwardness. Knock on her door made her freeze. She checked the peephole, and her heart nearly stopped. Julian stood in the hallway, still in his work clothes, his expression serious but not angry. She opened the door slowly. How did you know where I live? HR records, he said simply. Can I come in? Natalie stepped aside, her mind spinning. Walked into her small apartment, so different from the executive spaces he usually occupied, and turned to face her. Read it, she said, not a question. I did. It wasn't meant for you. I know. Julian moved closer, his gray eyes locked on hers. But I'm glad I read it, Natalie, because now I know you've been just as confused and afraid as I have. She wrapped her arms around herself. I didn't want you to think I was being unprofessional, or that I was trying to manipulate the situation between us. Manipulate? Julian's voice held a note of disbelief. You think wanting someone is manipulation, and that someone is your boss, when he holds your career in his hands? When people already whisper that you got ahead because of favoritism, ... Her voice cracked. Yes, it feels like manipulation, even when it's not. Julian closed the remaining distance between them. Then let me be absolutely clear about something. Your talent got you here. Your vision, your courage, your brilliance, those are what I see in the boardroom. What I feel when I'm alone with you has nothing to do with architecture or business. But Victoria is the past, Julian interrupted firmly. A closed chapter. She came back looking for something that died years ago. What you saw wasn't hesitation, Natalie. It was shock that she'd even try. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. I've been so scared of being second choice, of being the person you settle for. While healing from someone else? Julian's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle, but certain. You're not second choice. You're not a rebound. You're the first person in years who's made me want to take down every defense I built. The first person who makes me think about futures instead of just deadlines. Julian, she whispered, his name trembling on her lips. I'm falling for you too, he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. Actually, I think I've already fallen. That email just told me you were right there with me. The last of Natalie's resistance crumbled. She rose on her toes, closing the space between them, and kissed him. This wasn't the careful kiss from weeks ago in the rain-soaked car. This was honest and deep, full of all the feelings they'd both been holding back. Julian's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Natalie melted into him, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. No more hiding, he murmured. No more pretending this isn't real. What about work? The gossip? Natalie asked, though her hands stayed locked behind his neck. We'll handle it together. Transparently. I'll talk to HR, make sure everything is documented properly. Your position is based on merit, and everyone who matters knows that. Natalie nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. Together, then. Together, Julian confirmed, sealing the promise with another kiss. 6 months forward, the international project launched on a crisp autumn morning. Natalie stood in the center of the newly completed building, sunlight streaming through the adaptive facade panels. The surfaces shifted subtly, responding to the angle of light, creating patterns that danced across the polished floors. Journalists clustered around, cameras flashing. The architecture community had declared it revolutionary, a building that didn't just occupy space, but conversed with its environment. Julian stood off to the side, watching Natalie field questions with confidence and grace. Pride filled his chest, not because she was his partner, but because she'd proven every doubter wrong through sheer talent and determination. That evening, they drove to a quiet spot overlooking the city, the place where Julian had first admitted his feelings during that rainy night months ago. I have something for you, Julian said, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. Natalie's breath caught. Julian... He opened it, revealing not a ring, but a key brass, an old-fashioned, attached to a keychain shaped like an architectural blueprint. It's to the house I bought, he explained, watching her face. The one we looked at together last month. One you said had good bones, but needed someone to love it properly. Tears sprang to Natalie's eyes. You bought it? I bought it for us, Julian corrected. If you want it, no pressure, no expectations. Just an invitation to build something together, literally and figuratively. Natalie laughed through her tears, throwing her arms around his neck. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Julian held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. I love you, Natalie Harper. I should have said it weeks ago. I love you too, she whispered. From the moment you told me to proceed with my impossible proposal, Nothing's impossible when you're the architect, he murmured against her temple. They stood there as the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Two people who'd met through a simple mistake, a wrong door that turned out to be exactly right. 1 year later, the wedding took place in the building. Natalie had designed the adaptive facade, creating a cathedral of light around them. Friends, family, and colleagues filled the space, but Natalie only saw Julian, standing at the altar in a perfectly tailored suit, his gray eyes bright with emotion. She walked down the aisle in a simple dress of ivory silk, carrying orange blossoms. When she reached him, Julian took her hands, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. "We met because of a door left open," Julian said during his vows, his voice steady and sure. "I thought my heart was a locked room, but then you walked in, without knocking, and suddenly I remembered what it meant to feel. I promised to keep every door between us open, to share my fears, my dreams, my failures, and my victories. To build a life with you that's as bold and beautiful as anything you've ever designed." Natalie's tears fell freely. "I promise to keep walking through doors even when I'm scared. To trust that what we have is real and earned, not accidental. To design a future with you where every room has light, every structure has purpose, and every blueprint includes us both." They sealed their vows with a kiss as the facade panels shifted, sending patterns of light dancing around them like celebration. At the reception, Natalie's team presented a gift, a small architectural model with a plaque reading "Wrong Door." Right heart, laughter, and applause filled the room. Natalie and Julian stood together, arms around each other, surrounded by the people who'd watched their journey from awkward beginning to this perfect moment. The new door late that night arrived at their home, the house Julian had bought, the one they'd renovated together. He carried her across the threshold, both of them laughing. "Wait," Natalie said as he set her down. She pulled out her phone and opened an app she'd designed just for this moment. An AR overlay appeared over their front door, virtual fireworks. Spelling out home, Julian grinned. "You and your technology." "Our technology," she corrected, taking his hand. "Everything from now on is ours." They stood at the threshold together, neither rushing forward. This moment deserved recognition to people who'd found each other through chance, chosen each other through choice, and now promised each other forever. "Ready?" Julian asked. "With you?" "Always," Natalie replied. They stepped across together, into the warm glow of their home, into the life they'd built, into a future limited only by imagination. The door closed softly behind them, not shutting anything out, but sealing something precious. In a love that began with a mistake and became the most deliberate, beautiful decision either of them had ever made. Outside, Seattle's lights glittered like stars scattered across Earth. Inside, two hearts beat in rhythm, two hands intertwined. Two architects of their own happiness finally home. The story that started with one wrong door had led them through countless others' doors of doubt, fear, courage, and hope until they found the one that mattered most, the door they'd walk through together for the rest of their lives.